en la bombilla desnuda. Mosquito, mosquito soy, mosquito quemándome las alas en la bombilla desnuda.
Hola, hola, buenas tardes, ¿cómo estamos? Bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Jen y mi compañera intérprete es Alexia y estamos aquí para interpretar entre inglés y español.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? My name is Jen, and I am here with my colleague, compañera Alexia, and we are here to be your interpreters today.
También estamos aquí con otras compañeras, Isela, que está haciendo subtítulos en español en un enlace que van a poner en el chat ahorita, y Larisa, que está haciendo los subtítulos en inglés aquí en Zoom.
And we are here with other two compañeras, Isela, who is doing captioning and subtitles in Spanish, and we will share the link in the chat. And
y Larisa.
Y Larisa in captioning in English. Sorry about that.
Como mencioné, estamos aquí, Alexia y yo, para interpretar entre inglés y español, trabajando con un marco que se llama la justicia del lenguaje.
So, like I mentioned, Alexia and I are here today to interpret between English and Spanish, working with a framework that's called language justice.
La justicia del lenguaje incluye el compromiso de la presencia plena de todos y la capacidad de comunicarnos en nuestros idiomas. Reconocemos todos los idiomas presentes hoy aquí, mucho más allá de los idiomas coloniales, inglés y español. En particular, queremos reconocer los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas de esta tierra. Estamos, Alexia y yo, en tierra tomba no cedida.
So language justice includes a commitment to everyone's full presence and capacity to communicate in our languages. We want to acknowledge all the languages here today, and especially the languages of the indigenous people of this land. Alexia and I are in Los Angeles or unceded Tongva territory, where the Tongva people and language continue resistance.
Este evento se llevará a cabo activamente en inglés y en español. Vamos a estar usando ambos idiomas activamente, entonces si usted no se siente cómodo comunicándose en ambos idiomas, podrá elegir un canal para su idioma en unos pocos minutos.
Today, this event will be held in English and Spanish, so that means that both languages are going to be actively used in the space. So if you don't feel comfortable communicating in both, you will choose a language channel in a few minutes.
Estaremos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom que ya está activada.
We'll be using the Zoom interpreting function, which is active already.
Si usted se está conectando con su computadora, verá un icono de un mundito en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Si se está conectando con una tableta o un teléfono, pulse en más y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas.
If you're joining from a computer, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining from a tablet or a phone, click on more and you will see a menu that will include an option called language interpretation.
Si usted no puede ver el mundo o la opción de interpretación de idiomas, aunque esté activada la función, se puede poner en comunicación con Roberto para recibir ayuda.
So if you cannot see the globe or the language interpretation option, please contact Robert, for some technical help.
Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del mundo o interpretación de idiomas y a continuación elija su canal de idioma.
To listen to the interpreting, click the globe icon or language interpretation and then choose your language channel.
Y ahora vamos a empezar a usar la interpretación simultánea.
And now we're going to start using simultaneous interpretation.
So the first thing I'm going to do is a quick check of the interpreting line. I am speaking English right now, and I am going to ask one of the people whose faces I can see to listen on the Spanish channel and let me know with some kind of a thumbs up or some sort of a celebratory hand movement that you can hear Alexia on the interpreting line. So if you can hear Alexia, thank you very much. Ahora voy a hablar en español y si pueden checar.
Now I'm going to speak Spanish, and if you can check the English channel and give me a hand gesture or a face gesture or a little dance that you can hear. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now, everyone who prefers to participate in a single language should be on a language channel. People who speak both languages can either keep the interpreting function turned off or choose the language channel however you wish. You can choose to mute original audio if you just want to hear it to the interpreter's voice. If at any moment you cannot hear the interpreter and you want to, please get in touch with Roberto or anyone from the Poetry Project to get help. Because of a language equity, we are going to try to limit the use of the chat because we want to express and want to put all of our attention to the poets. So you might have noticed, folks who are understanding in Spanish, would have noticed that we use E instead of the traditional A or O. For example, we said bienvenidos, welcome. That is not a pronunciation error, but an intentional effort to create inclusive spaces and avoid making any assumptions about gender. Thank you so much to Poetry Project and Tierra Narrative for making it possible for us to be here. We are so pleased to be able to support this multilingual space since we feel strong solidarity with the work you do and a profound love to poetry and the films that are going to be shared today. And now we can officially begin with the event. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Alexia. Thank you, Isela and Larissa.
I will do the opening remarks in English, but we will go back and forth between English and Spanish through the event. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second event as part of Tierra Narrative's curatorial fellowship with the Poetry Project. Whether you are familiar with our work or learning about it for the first time, we're so excited that you all could join us and be a part of this event with us. We thank the Poetry Project staff, tonight's poets, the translators, and the incredible interpreting and captioning team for making this materially and technologically possible. Thank you to the rest of the Tierra Narrative Collective. Oscar and I are just two members and are honored to do this work alongside Kenya Guillen, Genesis Mancherena Baj, Risri Soberanis, and Leslie Martinez. We owe very special thanks for tonight's event to the Museo de la Palabra y La Imagen, or Museum of the Word and Image in San Salvador, especially its director, Carlos Enriquez Consalvi. Not only did they let us share these films with you, but they preserved them and have made them publicly available through their YouTube channel. So you can see them anytime you'd like. Founded after the Salvadoran Civil War in 1992, the museum is dedicated to the investigation, preservation, and dissemination of the historical and cultural patrimony of El Salvador, including support of indigenous and rural communities in doing so. If you are moved by tonight's films, we encourage you to contribute to their efforts, and I will drop the link in the chat. This event is presented to you from the Poetry Project, which has presented live readings, performances, and other work out of St. Mark's Church in the Bowery since 1966. The Poetry Project is committed to continuously and critically engaging the history and future of its presence in this particular space. And as part of that, would like to acknowledge the venue's existence upon unceded indigenous lands, specifically the territory of the Lenape people. As Tierra Narrative, we wish to highlight that tonight's work also comes from occupied indigenous lands, particularly of the Nahuatl, Lenca, Chorti, Cacahuira, and Pocoman people, whose struggles continue in the present. We also wish to point to the continuing role that direct US military intervention has played in the Isthmus since the 50s, and that continues to impact our transnational communities to this day. With the Poetry Project, we recognize the continual displacement and violence perpetrated against Indigenous people and people of color globally. We are aware that these kinds of acknowledgements can be misused as stand-ins for actual decolonization work, which is something for us to bear in mind as we go forward in our ongoing commitment to accountability, reparation, and equity. The Poetry Project traditionally shares a statement of safer spaces and some Zoom tips at the beginning of their events. Please refer to them in the chat, where a Poetry Project moderator will share links in these documents in both English and Spanish. I now hand things over to Oscar Moises Diaz, who will introduce tonight's films. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. To talk about Salvadoran cinema is to immediately feel as though one has entered a desert-like terrain, but it's not the desert. It's in the tropics of the Isthmus, where objects also tend to appear and disappear in the landscape, where they flicker, glow, and decay in attics through decades, where they are smuggled near and far in solidarity to be kept alive so they might one day return. And some films, they survive only in rumors carried by the wind. It's a history that is always unstable, fragmented, in constant transit, and isn't that exciting? Being of the Isthmus, and specifically in the context of tonight, El Salvador, one knows immediately that all archives are volatile, suspicious, and radioactive. Tonight, we share two films with you, one created in the years leading up to the Salvadoran Civil War, and one in its midst. These two films recently archived and digitized by the Museum of the Word and Image in El Salvador, both surreally play with illusion, appearance and disappearance, chaos, instability, and death. To be overly precious is not the way to play here. We must praise risk and be engaged in it. Tonight, we've asked three Salvadoran poets, Elena Salamanca, Lauri García Dueñas, y Raquel Gutierrez, to do this and to share work that resonates with these two films. The works of Elena, Lauri, and Raquel as Salvadoran poets and Salvadoran diaspora poets of a later generation activate sparks of these films in our present. The first film we bring to you is Baltazar Polio's El Gran Debut from 1976. Polio is known for his short fiction films that revolve around the working class, play, children, fantasy, and hope. They remind me of films by the Italian director Cecilia Mangini in a lot of ways, in the use of music and centering the daily lives of the proletariat. The film centers around a child and his dream of becoming a great circus performer, but he ends up dying on the same day as his debut. So instead, there is a funeral. It's a bit haunting, just as this time period tends to be for Salvadorans. It is the hauntological loop of the Buenas Épocas era, the cultural period known for its rebelliously utopian ideals. In this loop, we find from the present failed futures and tensions and state repression that accumulate through the decade. What frequencies does a pre-war film like this carry? Tanya Primavera, in an article, calls Polio the, quote, unknown filmmaker, writing that, quote, he exists and doesn't exist, end quote. His films were mostly made from leftover scraps of reel from a nearby advertising agency. This is Gran Debut. Tonight he is here. Tonight's second film, which we'll play immediately after, is by a collective known as Los Vagos, and the film is called La Zona Intertidal. It's so funny, I said that in the Spanglish. It is a 1980 poetic and experimental short film about the politically motivated assassination of a leftist professor conducted by US-trained and funded death squads during the Civil War. Just like the film prior to this, it relies heavily on a score, but this one is one much more avant-garde. It is an especially exciting recent restoration because it is one of very few surviving films from that period that isn't a documentary. Many of those abound. Rather, it is a work and moment in time of collective radical creativity by a group of leftist filmmakers all working together under the name Los Vagos to blur singular authorship because of precarity and danger. Los Vagos roughly translates to the strays and has connotations of delinquency and defiance. We will screen these two films through the Zoom space. The films will comprise a total of 31 minutes. There is virtually no verbal speech in this film from the featured characters, so captioning will just indicate sound. We will follow these screenings with work from tonight's poets, so stick around. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy El Gran Debut and La Zona Intertidal. Thank you.
Abusivo. ¿Por qué me pega? Ya le dije que por abusivo. Por abusado. Le pondré las manotas para las manos. Y yo le pondré las pantoflas para las patas. Manoplas, pantoflas, pantoflas.
La 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 la.
So those are our two films, El Gran Debut and La Zona Intertidal. I just wanted to note that the graininess that you were seeing in the film, while some of that had to do with Zoom lag, that also had to do with the restoration. So a lot of work had really gone into restoring these films to make them, viewable and also circulatable on YouTube. And so I just wanted to encourage people to support the museum if they're able to, so that they can continue doing work like this. And also their other efforts are just tremendous and important. So I have dropped that link in the chat. Now I will introduce our first poet reading tonight. But before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that if you opt to hear tonight's poets in English, you will hear, or actually, if you opt to hear tonight's poets in one language, English or Spanish, you will hear translations. These translations were created by Jen Hofer, Alexia Veytia-Rubio, Robin Myers, Olivia Lutt, Oscar Moises Diaz, and myself. We especially thank those who have translated for tonight's event and wish to acknowledge their hard work in making these works possible. accessible across language barriers. Ok. Voy a hacer la introducción para la primera poeta en español. En su libro América, Lauri García Dueñas comienza con las palabras: América es el libro que aún no se ha escrito y puede que yo no sea la persona indicada para escribirlo, pero lo voy a escribir. De este acto de poesía se desarrolla un poema largo que se dirige y escribe a contrapelo de un continente apocalíptico, con aquellas en su paisaje surrealista a quienes el continente niega a ver. Esta visión resuena con la historia del origen de Dueñas o García Dueñas como poeta. En una entrevista en la UNAM, la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, cuando le preguntó cuándo sabía que iba a ser una poeta, menciona un cuento que leyó cuando era niña de la poeta salvadoreña Claudia Lars. En ese cuento, una niña se encuentra con una salamandra en llamas. Aterrorizada, corre hacia su padre, quien le explica que la criatura mítica se les aparece a las niñas que están destinadas a ser poetas y que caminar por ese camino es hermoso y lleno de terrores. Nacida en San Salvador en 1980, García Dueñas es miembro fundadora del colectivo internacional Poetas del Megáfono y parte de una generación de poetas salvadoreñas de posguerra que ha sido llamada la generación del fin del mundo. Ella es escritora y periodista que residió 15 años en México y se encuentra actualmente de regreso en El Salvador. Es maestra de Comunicación y Cultura en la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Y ya, Lauri García Dueñas.
Thank you so much to everyone of all genders. I want to particularly share my thanks to Poetry Project, Tierra Narrative, Robin Myers and Olivia Lott, my translators. Olivia in particular translated 2 of my poems specifically for today. And I also wanted to particularly thank the Celaya Santera family who are taking care of my 2 children at this moment, who are 3 and 5, who are 5 years old and 8 months old. And without their childcare, I would not be able to be here.
América es el libro que aún no se ha escrito. Aunque tal vez no sea la persona más adecuada para hacerlo, voy a escribirlo yo. Mientras digo nada y espero que tus dedos se lucubren una selva, o el reducto de tu voz abra mi pensamiento en 2. Siempre hay un vocativo, una calle con nombre propio, un tren de espadas, el ruido de los coches, una pulsión, un lápiz de labios rojo asediando la madrugada para luego ser una mancha de partes borrosas que provoque un espacio hueco en el plexo, siendo el sol un dios fugitivo, algo desnudo e inacabado como el ruido marítimo del viaducto, o la escritura, libre interpretación del frenesí. Escribir con fruición los bordes de todas las cosas sin Dios, la primera mancha de sangre menstrual en una pared de piedra. Ella vino para separarnos y obtuvo tus palabras de árbol, la conquista es siempre pública. De nada sirven los celos frente a las jacarandas y las ventanas. Fui olvidada. Este continente es mi abuela y su locura senil. Mi cuerpo acompañándola a las 4 de la tarde. Mi recuerdo queriendo que no golpeen a mi abuela por esa locura senil. Las hormigas ahogando la sangre de mis tobillos. El abasolo y los asteroides que cayeron en el desierto. La mancha lunar repetida, el sexo en el jardín de la muerte y las guayabas, los aspersores encendiéndose en el norte de México mientras otros harán de la noche el ruido del roce y vos te quedarás gritando el nombre del lugar en la madrugada. No me detendré todavía, no me corresponde. América es tan larga, vocativo. Lo que he intentado decirte es tan hondo que no puedo, que me vuelvo estalactita, esa palabra repetida. Frente a tu presencia, carne. Carne que no entiendo qué lugar ocupa en mi territorio escribiéndote a deshoras con la ropa inadecuada para las exigencias de este mundo, tan distraída la grafía que no aterriza, como los helicópteros militares que nos acechan. ¿Qué es un continente? ¿Quién es una lengua? ¿A quién le corresponde decirnos los países? ¿Quién determina esta música que nos hace temblar la boca? ¿Cómo podremos salvarnos si aún nos corresponde descubrirnos a nosotros, que podemos ser 2 o 520 años de equívocos y a veces sangre, solo a veces? Algo tuyo está creciendo porque la vida germina en el momento menos esperado y te descubre escribiendo de noche la crueldad de los otros. ¿Cuáles otros? Texto que se pregunta a sí mismo y se muerde la cabeza. América, posesión entre los sobresaltos que nos llevan al norte, regresa completa al desierto que se descascara entre tormentas eléctricas. Pensar que una pasión es irrepetible nos ata. Tal vez sea el momento de desenterrar los pies, dejar en este mareo, en esta cosquilla íntima lo que somos, si somos algo. Un monumento nacional que es la casa de los espantos, líneas de ingregadas que marca el aire, luna de pedazos en visión aérea y amarilla, continente colección de callejones huesos, de alambres noches, documentación innecesaria, imágenes. ¿Cuántas imágenes caben en tu cárcel? La tinta que necesitábamos, la mancha, ¿qué mancha? ¿Por qué dicha denominación? Los hoteles ya no me esperan como antes. Estoy tratando de recuperar la química de mi humedad para que los labios puedan avanzar. Inteligible, dice el padre de América. Ininteligible, digo yo, con un vestido de largas mangas y cuello alto. El viaje no es la transportación. Camisetas con imágenes de cerdos al norte del territorio. Cruzar la línea de ingregarnos, decir palma de la mano, turbulencias, enfermedades del alma, voces que interrumpen el relato, proponen algoritmos. Algoritmo, no presuman del lenguaje. ¿Nos sobran los verbos americanistas? Nos sobran. Esta es la escritura que necesito. El viento agitado de los cielos que nos espera y que ojalá nos coloque en tierra firme los dedos, mientras América flota de la mano de una banda de aeromosas con capitas moradas. ¿Dónde estás a estas horas? La música revienta sus propias bocinas. No estoy sola, lo estuve, no me cobijaste. Y bueno, este es un fragmento de América y voy a pasar a dos textos de... El texto es un tiempo, el tiempo es un texto indescifrable, que están recién traducidos, son los textos no tan largos. Poema 0. Un cigoto de frío vive en mi corazón. El olvido tiene tu sombra. Sabes enumerar los escalones que nos separan. Sabes el punto en que ocurre mi ebullición. Hoy destaparon las cloacas de mi calle. Hoy fui la misma de siempre, la que no ves quebrarse en pliegues, la porno sentimental que quiere romper una piñata. La ciudad persiste en sus alambres rotos. Los hombres de la calle son fantasmas que rondan. Intempestiva fuga la mía. Aprendo a rechazar tu castigo cotidiano. El opresor se nutre del dolor de los vencidos. Los vencidos van a rebelarse. Los perros saben del aullido, pero las perras gritan también. Nada es absoluto en el reino animal. Tengo que irme de acá. La falta de movimiento me está matando. No nací para ser una figura sedentaria coleccionando huesos y sangre. Quiero dormir rodeada por los faroles de la Alameda Central en una isla del Caribe. Calco mi letanía en los cuadernos, hago planes de todo lo que quiero escribir. Soy naif y quiero comerme el mundo a zarpazos. Hombre que voy en bicicleta, excusas temporales para la misma certeza. Delirio de ti sobre mi carne sin voluntad, el rostro de la víctima en tu mano, mi rostro de víctima en tu mano. Quiero romper el cordón umbilical que nos ata. Me cansé de ser la mitad de tu incertidumbre, la demencia de Sísifo, no repetir el camino, voy a aventar piedras, voy a lapidar a la vieja mujer que se metió en mis arterias, intrusa. No quiero vivir desangrándome. La yor nacida va a romper cadenas de centenaria tortura. Voy a luchar contra el fascismo primordial. Ahora sí voy a respirar, llorar, coleccionar primaveras amotinándose, paisajes lacustres y marítimos. El vecino tiene problemas de cama. Mis asuntos son más complicados que una sábana de 5 esquinas. ¿Cuántas personas caben en una relación enmohecida? La existencia es la mueca de Dios burlándose. No me gustan sus chistes. Hay que poner el cuerpo en la escritura, el cuerpo en la escritura, el cuerpo. Desterrar el pensamiento, perdición del hombre y la mujer nuevas. Hay que quemar la ropa vieja, cumplir 30 años, irse de viaje, matar el tiempo de una vez, flotar desnudos en las fuentes verdes, caminar descalzos por el pavimento, convertirnos en mendigos para dejar de sufrir, dinamitar el pasado. A luz que arrastró el paraíso presente, ven a limpiar la cocina, a pagar las cuentas, a dormir conmigo. Lluvia cernida sobre la Ciudad de México, ábrenos las fauces, a reír a los niños, ladrar a los perros, metáforas simples de nosotros. He perdido la llave del gas, he perdido todo lo que fuimos. No me digas recuerdo, no digamos morir. Tengo hambre, la noche es venganza. Yo digo ruido celestial y el cielo de la ciudad se cae. Y hace mucho calor en San Salvador. Y con este me despido. 18. Todo empezó porque se derramó el agua que contenía las aceitunas y yo pensé que la tragedia no era tal. Las tragedias no son tan grandes a menos que uno esté de rodillas. Para mientras circula la ciudad sus pasos periféricos, sus masas de acero cubiertas de cemento. Hay un diálogo de pensamiento entre los grandes hombres que mastican. Los papalotes ejercen su derecho a la ubicuidad. Las cigarras no han brotado aún de las entrañas del ruido. Nostalgia del pájaro vagabundo, lee este poema. Rielan sus ojos como los trenes de metal. El eco de la voz es siempre letanía. Yo repito que es difícil juntar mapas en medio de este caos sideral. Caos sideral. Soy un error espectacular atravesado por avenidas e hipopótamos líquidos. Cuelgan las plantas de cadenas, cuelga mi piel de un recuerdo taxidérmico. Yo estuve ahí en un hotel de paso contigo y mis gritos eran sordos y los dioses mendigos que duermen nauseabundos en las esquinas de las tiendas de 24 horas. Mis esquinas eran veleros negros que precisaban de un viaje y vos eras un niño con los dedos de papel y los barcos en dobleces. Cualquier realidad suele ser posible. La escritura de mis páginas trasciende la superficie. Dentro de mí habita una angustia primordial que me hace escribir del tiempo muerto sobre el pavimento. El tiempo es cuerpo derrumbado, aprensión cuando el agua cae y no hay nada que pueda detenerla. Somos incapaces de lenguaje. Somos incapaces de lenguaje. Pequeñas existencias que caminan. Afuera el smog como una mancha. Adentro, corazones de papel como tus barcos. El deseo, un sol de pulpos ocres comiéndome las paredes del abdomen. Afuera, el mercado internacional cayendo y los griegos golpeando los escudos de la policía. Tenemos derecho a la rabia. Tenemos derecho a la rabia. Tenemos derecho a escribir en la vía poemas libres contra los asesinos del mundo. Soñar que la ciudad dejará de ser este montón de huesos rotos y mendigos envenenados con alcohol barato. Utopía. Para mí la ciudad sos vos. Pájaro color fucsia. Alma de mí. Todos los versos que brotan del fondo de esta baba caótica que enaltece a los insomnes, que miramos los libros y los atravesamos. Este tiempo es nuestro, lo sé, lo sé. Quisiera haberte dicho algo más, pero no pude. El tiempo no termina. Muchas gracias.
Oh my God. Muchas gracias, Lauri, por esos poemas. No pueden ver, pero
Thank you
estoy en
so
una...
much,
Thank
Lauri,
you
for
so
those
much, Lauri,
poems.
for
So you
those
can't
poems.
see,
I
but I
can't see
have,
them.
I am
Y'all
on a
can't see this, but
table
I'm at a
that
table with
has
so
so
many
many
things.
things, and
My
during that, my
tarot
tarot
cards fell, and
cards
the one that came
fell,
up
and
for
the
me
one
is
that I
the
got is the
star.
star.
So,
So
okay, that's how the
I
universe
think
speaks,
the
and this is the energy that I
universe has
feel
spoken, and
inside
this is
this
the
room
energy
with
that
you.
I
Things that happen to me,
feel
like this.
with you today.
This is what makes us
That's living.
alive.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce our next poet in English. So yeah, that was a little moment on the side. Okay, our next poet is Raquel Gutierrez. Born in Los Angeles and now living in Tucson, Raquel Gutierrez is a writer whose work is animated by so many things: the everyday and night of queer brown life, migratory movement through and beyond the Southwest borderlands, and especially the work of the artists that they have encountered, who also think through desire and dreams in places where the state violently imposes its boundaries. Gutierrez's poetry and cultural criticism both take a position of witnessing that is at once ethically attentive, diagnostic, and self-aware, as they write in a poem about visiting family in San Miguel in 1990 that I really love, during the Warriors and under the inescapable presence of the Chaparastique volcano. Wow, that's so hard to say, but the quote is, "It looms larger the farther away I get," and I feel like that's one of my favorite ways that Raquel has ended a poem, and it's kind of like how I often feel afterwards, in the vibration after the work is done. You know, do poems ever end? A true flaneur, their work generously holds capacity as much for this serious practice as it does for playfulness, pleasure, feeling, being beside one another. Raquel Gutierrez is a 2017 recipient of the Creative Capital Andy Warhol Foundation Arts Writers Grant. They work on a range of topics that have continued to inform their writing and teaching, including critical race theory, queer aesthetics, rascachismo, and performance art in the Americas. Their poetry and essays have appeared or are forthcoming in a number of publications, and their first book of prose, Brown Neon, will be published by Coffee House Press in the spring of 2022. And so here's Raquel Gutierrez.
Wow, thank you, Oscar Moises. That was a wonderful introduction, so generous, and I'm so appreciative and grateful just to travel alongside you and Mariam and the other members of the Tierra Narrative Collective. Coming here to our event from the unceded lands of the Tohono O'odham people. And thanks to the Poetry Project, to Jen Eliana Hofer, to Alexia Veytia, and to Lauri and Elena for their work, for their poems. And so my work here, I was very taken with the films and want to offer some language here that runs alongside the images that we watched together, shared in together. So this first poem, I'm pacing myself. So this title is, What Are You Laughing At? Don't worry, it only starts out badly. A jovial turn, a sudden giggle, carcajeando, carcajeando, carcajeando.
Chortling. Life begins with being born, school, work, taxes, divorce, death.
Life begins with some modicum of name, a stranger's breast, an ancestral embrace, a terrestrial assignation, or a pair of hands that bears kindness, or a pair of boots that walk into a vanishing point. We are a cosmic set of coordinates until one day the sky falls out of itself and it suddenly becomes shelter. Paint a door on the wall and walk through it, one portal into another. Cornstalks are the mazes in any language that begin to look alike. To run into the unknown is to run together, to run until we find the words that make up for lost time, until it is time to lose sight of our feet, to lose sight of our ability to connect with one another. Each attachment anxiously breathing over each other, falling into each other's rings, a stage that follows us everywhere until we arrive under the same circus tent. It's all painted, laughing at the wrong things. Those are entire lives. The occasions to don our normal drag are the fashions that don't fit us anymore. I put on a hat and it is the wrong hat. I put on a wig and it is the wrong wig. What is wrong with my head? What is wrong with the mirror? These are the transitions of Hollywood edits. Do me a favor, never care about me. Some of us fail at washing dishes. Some of us fail at skinning cats. Some of us fail at being named. Some of us fail at lighting the trash on fire. Some of us fail at funding proper desires. Some of us fail at expecting recognition. Some of us fail at disparaging those who came before us. Some of us fail at remaining nameless in our mourning ritual. Y es la risa que nos mantiene vivos. Okay, this poem begins with a fairly long epigraph. And the poem itself is called On the Desert Floor in Ocean. The epigraph. Hold your breath and see the anemone down by the high tide pilings in the wharf. A flower-like, ghost-like, wind-like creature, anemones, jelly butter cup, whirly and whirling. It behaves like flora in its fauna, limbs it floats like helium in its water world. Dulse and ribbon weeds sway with its sea leaps, mussels and whelks sit beside it when it rests. It has few enemies, the anemone, and melts when touched. The ocean supports so many ghosts, many flowers and many winds, but none is more vegetable than this air, none more dancing than this music, the music of the origami umbrella's name, anemone of the waves, translucent breeze, anemone, anemone, breathe, by Bradford Morrow, from a bestiary, a collaboration with the visual artist Kiki Smith. On this fibroid occasion, champagne and Percocet, my chakras conned me into misbehaving again. I see waves where there are none. I swim against the current. A whirlpool racks up debt, cysts. The feeling that isn't fact. When you take me to the edge of oncoming traffic, a school of fish, so I don't miss out. When you stop naming me mocoso in the middle of the night, don't be afraid. Time breaks hours, change like breakers flay the tide. The coax of many chaos, midwives a storm. We write it out, for there is no there. There, sana, sana, colita de rana. The sea urchin sees the urgency, and everywhere an earache along the perimeter. There is no kiss me on the lip of a broken earth, blistered. Its jealous pit holds song, a dark howl vigil. Nobody cares. Pero no hay pero. Nobody cares. Pero hay vidrio. I audition the brink and steady myself on serrated washes and watch. I worry about how waves brave these estuaries, how floods flash and flee, how it comforts a singer's fury in swirling timber. The aging crooner, an old microphone, a foamy throat for Richie Valens trading cards. On the day you came back, my chakras conned me into balancing the distance that navigates the mundane. The tides rise and they break again. The tides rise and they break again. The tides rise and then you gush on my face. And the last poem is called, the title is Loss into Sphere. I am stale, a burden. Remember when she wanted me to go over there and say hello to a tired head of state? There is no chill to the correctness of the cause. I send flowers to keep my judgments. Watch how my flux sprouts new melancholic acid. A rasquache, lover affect, follows from the failure to introject. Melancholic's 12-step to find language to represent, a loss to respond to the absence, constellating. A lazy aleph, every point pointing to our Latin thing. Is that all there is of the loved one by incorporating it, swallowing what has been lost, as if it were some kind of thing to live on, turning loss into a sphere, a fruit to sully, to suck, to bite into, to refuse, to accept what is no more, and to mourn. Loss, a little lullaby, objectified and swallowed whole, the mouth emptied of excess, into the valley of her damnedness, a distress signal, papi, so get out of her way. I am an exhibition, a tired anvil of the state, unsheathed, an ace of swords in self-burlesque, the absent other, my private life, a neoliberal penumbra. No one can see an oceanic feeling, a pout in the undertow of my surf competition within a sea of love. I lose sight every time I come up for air. Thank you.
Such beautiful poems, Raquel. Thank you so much. We just feel like we were also traveling with the kind of oceanic waves of your headphones at the same time. But I mean, just stunning. Thank you so much. And thank you to Lauri too, for those just stunning poems. I will now introduce our last reader. En español, leer a Elena Salamanca es ser animada por
Spanish. To read Elena Salamanca is to be animated by her rebellion against nationalism, patriarchy, historical amnesia, silence. In evocative poetry and prose, she attends to the lives of the people, and especially the women whose lives are embedded in the nation-building project. Telling stories for those with, as she writes in a story from the book Family or Oblivion, quote, with no possibility of descending. Salamanca deeply inhabits the idea that living means taking sides. As much a poet as a historian, Salamanca has a long relationship with the Museo de la Palabra y La Imagen, a museum that has made viewing these films possible tonight. Her recent Museum of the Image of the Word exhibition, Urdir la Trama Rota, or Weave the Broken Plot, was presented in Spain to honor 100 years of Salvadoran women in visual culture. Born in San Salvador in 1982, Salamanca's body of work brings together literature, performance, memory, art, and politics in public space. She has published many books in Spanish, most recently, La Familia o el Olvido, Family or Oblivion, and Último Viernes, Last Friday. Her work has been translated into English, French, German, and Swedish. As a doctoral candidate in history from the Colegio de Mexico, her thesis investigates the relationships between Central American unionism, citizenship, and exile. She earned her master's in history from El Colegio de Mexico in 2016 and the Universidad de Huelva in Spain. And now, Elena Salamanca.
Hola. Hola.
Hello. Hello.
¿Alguien me puede decir si me escuchan?
Can people hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Yes, you can hear you. We can hear you well. Perfect. Hello, good evening. I'm so happy to participate in this experience and also this experiment of writing about these short films from Salvadoran film history. I have a very close relationship with these films. These films have nourished my work for many, many years. So I feel very pleased to be here. I want to thank Maria and Oscar for the invitation and for inviting me into this process. Also, Jen Hofer and Alexia Veytia-Rubio for the translation of this poem that I actually wrote very recently. So this is going to be the first time that I read it. Before I read it, I wanted to tell a little bit of a story. Like Raquel, I felt the desire to write something about these short films. And actually, I thought that I had to, in fact, but something really happened to me with the film Intertidal. And what happened is that the following. Many years ago, a Salvadoran poet who was exiled in Spain talked to me about one of his friends from adolescence, who was the war years. So these were very, very young poets before the war. And he was talking about his friend, the poet, which was a whole legendary figure. Manuel Torto, he would talk to me about this friend always. And as time passed, we became Facebook friends. And we ended up both being in Mexico and El Salvador at the same time, but we never got to see each other. Either he was somewhere and I wasn't there, or I was somewhere and he wasn't there. We've always had a very close relationship and had many, many conversations over Skype and over video conferences, video calls. And he became a very, very close friend. And he's told me many stories of his artistic youth in the 60s and 70s. And when I saw the videos suddenly in Intertidal, I began to see the hands, the face, the nose of a man that I knew, a man that was very familiar to me. And later, he told me that he was a friend of the filmmaker. And so this mythical figure, this mythical personage that I had always known that he had this friend from the past who I knew had written poems, turns out to be the filmmaker. So he was in this film, and thanks to this event, I was able to encounter him in this film. I then wrote this poem called Marshes in the City, and it was a very strange experience to encounter him in this context. So, okay, Marshes in the City.
Marismas en la ciudad. Todos los muchachos de los que hubiera querido enamorarme ya están muertos. No nos dieron la oportunidad de compartir el mismo siglo, las décadas, cierto malestar histórico y la humedad marina bajo los pies. Sentir que nos hundimos alguna tarde entre las marismas, abismos de mar en las ciudades, abismos de mar y flores silvestres. Buscar con los pantalones enrollados hasta los tobillos, algún rastro en la arena, un anillo, un miedo. Una noche, hace muchos años, no pude mirar el amor frente al mar. Sujeté la mano de un muchacho de mi tiempo y sentí la de un fantasma, la aleta ligosa de un pez en el congelador del supermercado. Preferí pensar en otro. Dos grutas forman una boca, un beso de agua donde se unen las mareas, donde se muere y se revive. Mientras recuerdo si leí esta frase en un poema o la imaginé, pienso en otro. Muchachos de 1970 para siempre hermosos en las fotografías a las que sus madres aún prenden velas. Yo no puedo enamorarme de un hombre que no ha conocido la guerra, no importa cuál, pero que sepa que a veces bajo las nubes explotan las bombas. En mis clases de historia política supe que los muchachos hermosos y bronceados de las fotografías colgadas en cualquier pared, presentadas por la policía, eran los muchachos de la nueva izquierda. Eran los hermosos que no temen el futuro. Porque el futuro era un fruto incierto, la pulpa abierta por las manos, una gruta de membranas y azúcar. El futuro no era un tiempo, no había ocurrido y quizá nunca iba a ocurrir. El sitio donde se juntan las mareas, ese momento en el que el día no es aún día, pero la noche ha dejado de ser noche. Por eso la muerte. También en clase aprendí que Rosa Luxemburgo coleccionaba flores en la cárcel, un herbario, donde guardó pensamientos salvajes, viola tricolor, viola cornuta, floras tempranas de otoño, porque el invierno, quién sabe qué ocurrirá algún día. Por favor, alguien diga a mis tías anticomunistas que Rosa Luxemburgo coleccionó anémonas, como sus abuelas, y usó un sombrero de paja en las tardes del viento lacustre de Coatepeque. Por favor, cuéntenles de Kropotkin y su fascinación por las abejas y del polen que pervive millones de años sobre la tierra, muchos más años que cualquier general pasado de tragos o sistema político, porque aún hay señoras de sociedad que creen que la conquista del pan es un recetario de cocina. Y pregúntenles también a mis tías y a los generales si alguna vez se sostuvieron entre las mareas en equilibrio romántico entre la ceniza y las piedras preciosas, ahí justamente donde dos muchachos de dos tiempos que pudieron ser peces hunden los pies.
I just read one poem to share. So I'm so grateful to have been here. And I'm done. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Me escuchan. Oh my God.
Can
Muchas
you hear
gracias
me?
por ese poema y también.
Thank you so much for that poem and that story. What a small world, and wow, seeing the films to have that realization. Wow. I don't know what to say because I feel like it's been such a special night, and I know that with Mariam and the entire Tierra Narrative team, these events are our dream to talk with people across the region and different places, and that language should not be any kind of problem to find one another, to encounter one another more and more. And this is just going to be the beginning of much more. Thank you so much to all of you, all the three of you, for being here with us this evening. I'm never reading from my script, but sorry, those who are interpreting me. It's fine. But at this moment, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Our next event is going to be the 13th of May. It's a program that we're going to do with a Guatemalan collective from Guatemala City called Cuerpo Éticas. And they are going to organize a reading. And yeah, I think that that's everything that I need to say. We can just hang out and be here. If you want to speak amongst yourselves, I don't know if you have questions about each other's work, or I think I could also say that
en un espacio libre.
and we're going to open up a freer space